What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and you guys all poured out in big support of my TLDR version of what was announced at Wizards Presents, and as such, you had asked that could I do the same thing for the Unearthed Arcana that was released on Thursday. So a couple of things. One, hey, look, that number has continued to rise, and if you'd like to make it rise higher, consider subscribing to the channel. I take your feedback into account as why this video is even existing at the current point. So the second part is, if you didn't know, that Thursday the 18th, immediately or a couple hours after the Wizards Presents live stream, the first version of Unearthed Arcana 1 for One D&D was released, called Character Origins. The little bit of background to give you there is One D&D is the current code name for whatever the newest iteration of Dungeons & Dragons will be that's releasing in 2024. We've known about this coming for a while, but this is our first kind of peek behind the curtain into the design process. Wizards of the Coast wants us involved, wants everybody to go ahead and try out these rules. The survey will go live on September 1st. I'll be doing a video on that when it happens, and they want you to fill out the survey and let them know what you like and what you don't like. The other thing to stress in this is it is a playtest. It is only for things contained in the 2014 Player's Handbook. All this stuff will be, again, all about that kind of information about the things from 2014. The Player's Handbook featured Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide. This happens to be just about character-based origins, covering things like feats, backgrounds, races, and some new updated, what they're calling a rules glossary, with new updates to some core mechanics that we know from, again, the base core rulebooks. Again, consider this is playtest information, and as such, we don't have the entire picture here. We have what they've given us in this document. So some of the things we may have questions on, why they work a certain way, and the answer is we just don't know yet because we don't have enough information. So now that that's out of the way, I'll show you how to get it, and then we'll go from there. So you have to go to D&D Beyond. If you were to go to the Wizards of the Coast website and look under Unearthed Arcana, where you think it would be, it's not contained there. It's only found on D&D Beyond. I can go to Sources. You have to have a D&D Beyond account to get it. You click this link, One D&D Playtest Materials, click Character Origins. I had to click Claim Now originally, but now you can go down here and download the PDF, which is what you see right here, and I will skip ahead to the top. So that's how you get it. Like I said, this is what's being covered: races, backgrounds, starting languages, feats, and the rules glossary. As I said, this is only things from the Player's Handbook. We're going to get updates to all of the races. Backgrounds have been completely retweaked. Starting languages is pretty self-explanatory. Feats seem like they will no longer be a variant rule for the game. They are a base function of the game included in backgrounds. And then updated rules, which I'll touch on the ones that I think are the major changes. So this is kind of the breakdown of what you'll get for every race now: the type of creature, whether humanoid, ooze, construct, size, speed, lifespan, and special traits. Backgrounds will give you the following. Your ability scores are now tied to backgrounds. You can get the standard Tasha's Cauldron stuff of +1, +2, or +1, +1, +1. You get 2 skill proficiencies like you always did. Now, all backgrounds grant a language and a tool proficiency, a first level feat, because now feats have level requirements, and equipment. The things to know about this is that every race will know Common, and every race will know a other language from there's a table at the end or in the middle here that shows standard languages and rare languages. Every race knows Common and a standard language, and your background will give you the option to learn another language from either the standard or rare language list. Some races give you a specific language above and beyond. Another thing to know is there are no more half races. Orcs are now included in this. Half orcs and half elves do not exist. This is kind of what they've talked about here. You pick the 2 parents that you had, whatever intermingling you want to do: dwarf, elf, dwarf, dragonborn, elf, human, whatever you want, right? There is no limitation there. Yes, I've already seen people come out and complain about, well, that doesn't work because of this specific lore. Guess what? This is system agnostic. It's not setting based, so your lore doesn't matter. It's just, this is how the game works. This is the mechanics of it, right? And again, it's playtest. It might change. So pick whatever parentage or lineage, whatever you want to have it be, and you can pick the traits from the given parent. So if you were going to make a half-elf, traditional half-elf of a human and an elf, you could pick to either have the features of a human or the features of an elf. And as far as your visual representation, you can mix and match any bits you want, right? If you're tiefling elf, You could have horns, you could have different colored skin, you could have a tail or not, ears pointed one way or another. You decide. That's how that's going to be handled. So it's basically aesthetics that you want and the mechanics and sort of race abilities that you want. Again, here's a quick breakdown. You'll also see medium and small being an option for something like tiefling and human now. You can choose to be medium or small, and all races have 30-foot movement speed across the board. There is no more 25-foot movement on races. Humans have adjustments here. Still get a feat, but it's first level limited. Ardling is a brand new race that was added. They're basically this sort of upper plains version of a tiefling. I always thought that was Asmar, but apparently not. And they are sort of a winged sort of upper plane being that has the head of an animal, think Egyptian gods. You'll also see tables like this very frequently. Most of the races that have spells will get access to a cantrip at first level, a different spell at third level, and a different spell again later at fifth level. And the thought process behind these is they have the same terminology now that most of the new things we've seen, where you get to cast this once per long rest, and then again, you can continue to cast it with any spell slots you have. That has been applied across the board, even to feats and things like Magic Initiate. You also get to choose the ability score that utilizes these spells, whether that's Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. They also did this in such a way so that all races have sort of an active thing, I guess with the exception of human, but they can get a feat which could do that. But something that they can do. The example given here, as we'll scroll down and see, is the dwarves. Normally, Stone Cunning didn't do anything. Now it's an activatable thing that gives you Tremor Sense. Dragonborn still kind of gets shafted. It is the player's handbook only, which means it ignores the gem dragons included in Fizzbands. But it also feels like it's worse off than the Fizzbands version of Dragonborn. It does get a breath weapon. It does get a proficiency bonus times per long rest, but it is an action to use, but the damage is a d10 plus your character level. So a little bit of a boost there. Here's the thing. We don't know what the attack action actually looks like or how actions work yet because we haven't seen that mechanic, but on face value, it does seem like it's weaker. As I said, Dwarves got an update to now include Stone Cunning as a sort of an active feature that they can use as a bonus action and proficiency bonus times per long rest. I'll say that as well. Any instance where something had a number of times per long rest or a numerical value, like you could do this 3 times per long rest, or this gave you a +5 or a +2 or whatever, those have all been replaced with proficiency bonus as a sort of built-in scaling mechanic. Drow no longer have sunlight sensitivity. I kind of expected that to be the case with the changes in Monsters the Multiverse, but that's how that is. Gnomes are more or less the same, except the rock gnome ability now basically changes the way you use prestidigitation to make your little trinkets. Halfling have no kind of sub-race options similar to dwarves, and the thought process in the lore sort of behind that is the difference between a stout halfling and a lightfoot halfling or a mountain dwarf or a hill dwarf was purely just like terminology. It wasn't a strictly kind of biological difference. At least that's kind of how it seemed to me in the video that they made. So that's why they've kind of been condensed into just halfling with no sub-race choice. Same thing with dwarf. Orc, again, will be the new base in the game as opposed to half-orc. And then Tiefling, again, got adjustments to now pick a plane. 3 options, kind of lawful evil, chaotic evil, neutral evil, similar to how the Ardling has lawful good, chaotic good, neutral good. The only difference is what you choose gives you a different damage resistance, and again, you get cantrips and higher level spells. This also seems to be the way they're going to combat the fact that they've just completely gotten rid of all of the Mordenkainen Tome of Foes variants of Tiefling. Those have no way to return. They have been lost to time unless you have those books physically on hand. Now, backgrounds have been changed to give you all of the things that I had told you they give you earlier on, and they said basically building your own custom background is essentially one of the starter options. Your other option is to pick one of the sample backgrounds that they've included here, or pick one of the sample backgrounds included here and adjust it as you see fit. Again, we talked about all the different things you get. The only thing is now equipment is you get 50 gold pieces to basically choose whatever equipment you want. That's across the board. You could spend all of it on materials and different things, but whatever you don't spend is just gold pieces that your character has on hand. You do still get equipment from your class. We just don't know what that looks like because it doesn't include class information here. Also, it also goes on to say that you can still use these rules with races from somewhere else if you so choose. You just wouldn't if you're using these backgrounds with a race that provides you with some sort of ability score improvement. You don't get to stack them. You keep whatever gives you the ability scores, but you can use everything else here. Again, they do provide you a starting feat in place of a background feature like we used to have back in the day. These are all the existing ones. We're going to scroll past them. Here's your languages. As I said, common and a language of your choice. Common Sign Language was added to the list of standard languages, and Thieves' Cant is considered a rare language, so folks can learn Thieves' Cant from their background. Feats more or less remain the same, other than the fact that they are now basically a base feature of the game. They have a level requirement, and they said that none of the first level feats, the sort of starter ones that you'll get, will give you an ability score improvement. But feats that you'll be able to access at later time will have those. Perhaps an 8th level feat or beyond will be able to give you the +1 to a certain ability score. We also have no concept whether feats are something that happens separately from ability score improvements like we've seen in previous editions. Do you only get them from your background, and is there a background scaling mechanic, or do you still have the option for an ability score and a feat every 4 levels? For all we know, you don't even get ability scores every 4 levels. That could change. We just don't know. The other option is if it has a prerequisite, none of these do because they're all for first level. And then again, are they repeatable is stated up front so that, again, if it's a feat you can take multiple times, you're aware. Quick example here is the alert feat, right? It now gives you proficiency bonus to initiative as opposed to just adding a +5. But think about terminology in this way. This now works with a rogue's reliable talent. They also changed things. They said alert used to be very much all about you with the whole not surprise. Now it gives you the opportunity instead of that to swap your initiative with somebody else. We also don't know what the surprise mechanic looks like, if it even truly still exists. We have a little bit of an inkling, and I'll talk about that later. The skilled feat now only gives you 3 skills, not also tool proficiencies, but they have added, at least in this instance, 2 feats that give you tool proficiencies. For example, the crafter feat here gives you 3 different artisan tools proficiencies, and coming later, the musician feat will give you 3 musical instruments. I assume we'll get more of these. I also assume this isn't the entire list of first level feats, but I could be wrong. And then as such, you get these specific ones to get tool proficiencies, whereas skilled is just for skills. This also gives you a discount on things and faster crafting time, which again, I hope means we're going to get good crafting rules in these updated versions in One D&D, but we don't know what that is because we don't have it. The healer feat also does a job of showcasing that they wanted to fix an issue that they had in the player's handbook, which was as someone like a life cleric, someone pretty much designated as a healer, you would think the healer feat would be for you, but it actually did nothing for you. So as such, a lot of these feats that might look like they could be cool on their own, but should benefit somebody else, now have a mechanic in which to do so. For example, for healer, if you roll a 1 on a healing spell die, when you're healing someone, you can reroll that 1. Lucky has been adjusted to be proficiency bonus times per long rest. It used to be 3 times, again, to my point of proficiency bonus being the mechanic. It is now proficiency bonus times per long rest. And it either grants advantage or disadvantage, no longer just allowing a reroll, so it can't stack, but again, it will allow something like a rogue to self-initiate advantage. As mentioned, Magic Initiate allows you to cast things with spell slots. Here's the Musician feat as well. Again, beneficial to a bard or someone not a bard. Savage Attacker is the same, so it's still not great. Skilled is now repeatable, so you can take this multiple times. Tavern Brawler is significantly improved in that it allows you to reroll unarmed strike rolls of a 1, basically being useful for monks. It also allows you to shove as part of your attack roll, and instead of proficiency with improvised weapons, it now only gives you proficiency with furniture. An odd choice, but either way. And then we have the Rules Glossary, which updates certain rules. For example, it'll tell you, you'll see 3 spell lists here. The Arcane spell list covering bards, sorcerers, warlock, wizards. Divine covers clerics and paladins, and Primal covers rangers and druids. We don't know what this ultimately means. Is this something that's going to replace all class-specific spell lists? It gets weird because, for example, the bards, the Arcane spell list doesn't have healing on it, but there may be changes and alterations based on that. We'll see how that goes. We just don't know at this point. But the thought process is in the future, they can, if they add a bunch of new spells, they can say these spells are on the Arcane spell list. And you know, oh, my character has access to the arcane spell list, therefore they have access to these spells. It adds less confusion and it saves a little bit of printing space. All of the tools have been updated to have a standard gold piece across the board. That's covered here. D20 test is a new terminology here that encompasses ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. Instead of me needing to say, you get a benefit to this thing when you make an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, I can now say you get this benefit whenever you make a D20 test. Just a simple terminology change. However, D20 tests, they state, are only given if the number of the goal you're trying to hit is no less than 5 and no greater than 30. Meaning that you can't have someone roll and say, hey, the DC is 2 or the DC is 35. There could be more information there, but either way. Rolling a 1 now is also an auto fail no matter what it is on any D20 test, and rolling a 20 is an auto success. So this counts for saving throws and ability checks, not just attacks. Excuse me. But rolling a 20 is also an instance to give you inspiration, which has been adjusted. We'll talk about that shortly. The other thing that's gotten a lot of people up in arms that I'll talk about is critical hits. Currently, it is only available for player characters, not for monsters, and it's only on weapons and unarmed strikes, not spells. I'm not a huge fan of this change, but I get it for spells. They said apparently a lot of people didn't realize spells could crit. There's only 30-something spells that actually can crit that have an attack roll. I don't know. It also specifically states you reroll the weapon damage, so as written, doesn't look like it applies to sneak attack or divine smite, but who knows, those in those class-specific stat blocks may have language that says this can benefit from a critical hit. We just don't know. We don't have that information. They also use as an example that dragons, they said, have a crit mechanic in that they have a breath weapon, which is a big damage hit that they can use to activate whenever they want to show the players that they're being serious, and that has sort of the recharge mechanic, which is how they kind of balance it out. But my problem is a 7th level rogue with evasion can negate your crit to 0 damage pretty consistently, so it's not that scary. And I think it's due to saving lower level characters from auto dying with crits, but who knows, we might see in the future monster stat blocks, some of them may have, hey, this attack can crit, or a ability that this monster can crit, or maybe it'll be, monsters of CR 5 or higher or CR 10 or higher are allowed to crit. We just don't know at this current point. I still encourage you to try this out in the playtest, give it a shot, see how you like it. If you don't like it, tell them. If it actually worked out okay, let them know. Grappled has been adjusted now. The big change is that if you are grappled, you have disadvantage on attack rolls against anyone other than the grappler. Inspiration, as I said, the way you can get it is still the same. The DM can give it to you if they so choose for one reason or another, but you also get it whenever you roll a 20 on a D20 test. You can only have one instance of inspiration at a time, but if you were to get it when you already have it, you're allowed to give it to another player, and the big change is you lose any inspiration you have when you finish a long rest. The thought process is, instead of using your gamer mind to save all of your resources for that big final boss or when it's necessary, and then ultimately never using it, because you can get it more often and also lose it at the end of a long rest, you'll actually utilize your inspiration. Long rest hasn't changed pretty much in any way other than the fact that if your long rest gets interrupted, but at least an hour has passed, you do get the benefit of a short rest, which also means that short rests still exist. I do also want to talk about the incapacitated condition very quickly because it says surprised as part of incapacitated. It says if you are incapacitated when you roll initiative, you have disadvantage on the roll, which we don't know, but that might be what surprised is now. It's not an auto free turn, perhaps. Maybe it's just you have disadvantage on attack rolls, which might make sense with the change to alert. Slowed is also a new condition, kind of banking on you basically getting some benefits, some of the downsides of restrained and also limited movement, and that basically dealing with difficult terrain. And lastly, the big change would be unarmed strike now is basically seems to be both punching, unarmed strike in general, but also grappling and shoving are all included in that. We don't know if grapple and shove are separate, but we do know now that if you hit somebody with an unarmed strike, you can choose to grapple them as long as you have a free hand or choose to shove them, which means that potentially armor class becomes more important than things like ability checks, which some people are already complaining that athletics checks are the only strength-based ability check that exists, and if you remove grapple and shove from the use of strength and athletics checks, what's the point of even having strength other than the attack rolls if unarmed strike can do it instead? Also, as written, the monk could still technically use it for the damage, but doesn't appear to be able to use it for the grapple or shove. Possibly, again, the monk's stat block might say that they can use their dexterity for all benefits of unarmed strike, meaning that you could grapple and shove. It also means that in theory, if you were a monk, you could hit somebody, shove them prone just by hitting them. Like there's no save associated with the shove currently. Knock them prone and then wail on them continually with advantage for them being prone. Because again, it just connecting that hit allows you to do the shove. Whereas again, we saw Tavern Brawler allows you to connect, deal damage, and then also shove. So there's some benefits there. Lastly is the spell lists. As you can see, you have Arcane, Divine, and Primal. You'll also notice, again, for the Arcane, it's primarily things that all of those classes have. For example, now your Bard could have Shield or Find Familiar, or your Sorcerer could have Hex. But that would also, in theory, mean that the Bard doesn't have access to any healing spells. But it does say in future Unearthed Arcanas, we'll show you how classes and subclasses can potentially gain access to the other lists, which I feel will fix a lot of that problem. The other thing mentioned here is there is no Eldritch Blast on the list of cantrips for the Arcane spell list, and I honestly believe that's because, rightfully so, Eldritch Blast will likely become a class feature. People are already complaining that because spells can't crit, that means that Eldritch Blast can't crit. Well, Eldritch Blast isn't listed here, so perhaps Eldritch Blast is a special ability of the Warlock, like it used to be in older editions, not a cantrip, and as such, as it being a special ability, perhaps it's allowed to crit. Or perhaps it's a cantrip specifically to their stat block, but I think making it an ability also means that it can't be counterspelled. Not that you're going to counterspell cantrips that often, but that could be a cool thing that happens. Like I said, this video is probably already long enough as a TLDR version, but there's a lot of information to unpack here. So again, I hope this was helpful and beneficial to all of you, and I hope I didn't really miss anything. But anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time.